Each year, 6,000 babies are born with Down syndrome. That means about 1 in every 700 babies are born with this disorder each year. This shows us that Down syndrome isn't as uncommon as so many people believe it to be. How many people have you seen in your lifetime that have Down syndrome? I bet every one of you have seen at least one person with this common disorder. What exactly is Down syndrome? How does it happen? How do I talk and address someone with Down syndrome? These are just some of the questions I'm going to answer during this presentation. So Down syndrome begins at the point of conception. Each child starts with one nucleus where 23 chromosomes of genetic material are stored. But when a child only has 21, this indicates the start of trisomy 21, or most commonly known as Down syndrome. So it's important that when we talk and address someone with Down syndrome, we use the proper terms and words. It's Down syndrome. Down syndrome was named after a man by the name of John Langdon Down. And for what we know, he did not have Down syndrome. So we do not refer to it as Down's syndrome, though in other parts of the world, lots of people still do. Okay. The second thing to know is that the person should not be defined by their disability. So this means that when you see or meet someone with Down syndrome, you don't think about what they can't do, but also think about what they can do and what they are able to do and work around that. They're not suffering from Down syndrome. They just have it. This is so important to know. So this is my friend Chase here. And I am so lucky to spend some time with a 6-year-old boy every other Sunday morning. So throughout these 2 years, I've learned a lot about how he works, how he moves around, how he learns, his personality. And the very first thing that I noticed when I was helping him was that he could only focus on 1 or 2 things for a few minutes, and then he would just move on to the other thing. So I was wondering, why does this happen? Well, people with Down syndrome have a hard time getting their short-term memory to their long-term memory. And this affects everything, like their attention span, their behavior. This is a struggle for them, but it's also a struggle for their families. Imagine not being able to clean your house or cook good meals or just have a few minutes to yourself because you have to have your eyes on them at all times. This is the struggle for a lot of families and caregivers of people with Down syndrome. Okay. So when I interviewed Chase's family, one of the questions that I asked was, what are some of the day-to-day challenges that you face as parents? They said that the number one thing was the slow development. So to explain this further, I'm going to use steps as my example. Learning is like taking little steps upward. You learn things as a baby like I have feet and I have hands. But as you get older, you learn things like how to add and how to multiply and how to write a paragraph. But for people with Down syndrome, these steps are just a little bit harder for them to reach. When I helped Chase, I noticed that he puts a toy in his mouth, a stage that most children would have been done at age 3 or even 4. But he doesn't know any better because of his slow development. So he still does it. Children with Down syndrome need constant supervision. This means that on mornings that I'm helping out with Chase, I have to have my eyes on him at all times. And this is so hard for me. But I can't even imagine how much harder it would be for parents and families of children with Down syndrome. So you might be thinking, why is she talking about any of this? Why do I need to know about any of this? I'm telling you this because I feel that it's so important that people know about children and people with Down syndrome. A lot of people don't understand how hard they try and how much work it is. And I want you to understand that even though they may not learn as fast as us, and they may not work as fast as us, they're people. And they have so much they can do, and they may not do the same things or be capable of doing the same things as a neurotypical person. And this is just a minor to what the things that they can do and the things that they do understand that a neurotypical person doesn't. So I want you to take these 3 things away from this presentation. The first thing is that people and caregivers of people with Down syndrome try so hard every day to help them and to be the most attentive and helpful and caring people they can be, to be able to go through the day with the least amount of tantrums and flops. The second thing is that children and people with Down syndrome work so hard to be like everyone else. They are trying constantly that it tires them out. This is one thing that Chase's dad reminded me, was that even if it seems like Chase isn't trying, he really is trying. And he's trying to the point where he is tiring himself out and he is unable to do things that we can because he's trying so hard. Imagine being on the playground. You're a 6-year-old boy. You're full of energy and excitement. And you're watching all the other kids running around, laughing, playing, having such a good time effortlessly. But you're sitting there, and because you're exhausted from just learning and making sentences, you are unable to play and run around with them. Or when you try, you can't. This is the world that people with Down syndrome live in. This is the only thing that they know. Imagine how hard that would be. And the last thing is, people with Down syndrome are people. They have good days and they have bad days. They have good moments and bad moments. They have emotions and they have feelings. They can get jobs and graduate and get married just like anyone else can. So before you think badly or are not sure what to think of someone with Down syndrome, I want you to remember that they're people. Because people with Down syndrome, I believe, really can change the world for good.